no, it's loose. I always buy them 2 sizes larger.
Geoff, move back over there. You want a picture. Keep moving, keep moving, keep moving.
Right
Stop.
there.
Right there.
Okay, you ready?
No.
Okay, I'm going to have to take a look at this. You know. And remember, the internet does not forget. And if it's on the internet, it must be true. Right, Gene?
Yes.
Well, I don't know if you can read that. That's an HP67 upside down. Isn't that neat? Anyway, I thought I'd start off with that and see how many people recognize doing that in 1974 on their HP25.
Shell oil.
Yeah, well, there's Shell oil, Esso oil, hello, and a few other things. Anyhow, today's talk actually is, you know I'm a pilot, but it's not just flying airplanes. We do a lot of things. And one of the things over the last 35 years of flying airplanes is you're not allowed to read stuff on the flight deck in the old days. You couldn't read newspapers, you couldn't read magazines, but if you read, you could read the flight documents. You could read up on the aircraft's documents and look through the performance charts. And if you're going to Hong Kong from Vancouver, you've got 17 hours to read, starting 11 o'clock at night when you got up at 7 and you were on call and you went to a baseball game and they paged you. So I used to write a lot of programs depending on the calculator I had with me, which started with the 25 and then went into the 41, which had fantastic programming. So we're going to start with the 6-7, work our way through, and we're going to go to the operations center, like I do every day when I go flying, and we're just going to go all the way to London so I can say hi to Vladek, drink some Kiski beer at the Polish Club, and talk to everybody at the HPPC. You have a question already.
Yes. What's plugged into the what is that plugged into?
Oh, you're going to get to see all this stuff.
Okay.
Oh yeah, but patient. I'm going to hand some stuff around. Anyway, so this does work. And somebody corrected me, there should be no apostrophe there, and he's absolutely right, because it's HP's plural, which I take into the flight deck, which always confuses security when you have to explain things like, what's that? It's a watch. What does it do? I don't know how to answer those questions. So from the HP67, HP42, and those are the culprits we're going to look at, except there is a mistake on here, Gene. I'm not going to talk about that one. This is just getting a little too long, and I'm not a great RPL fan, although that's a fantastic little machine. So there are the culprits for today's talk. And today's talk, just to prove to you that they actually do make it onto the flight deck, this is a Boeing 777 flight deck. And we can see the HP71, the one I'm not going to talk about, the 48GX, which has a black screen, one of the last Indonesian ones. There's that 41C, and in fact, if the lights were out, you would see that this is a little plug-in with an LED light. And I've got it back there if anybody's interested in writing down the manufacturer name and buying them. It slips right into the module holders. There's a 29C with all 98 lines of programming filled. And we'll see how I use them. So I walk into the flight planning office about an hour and a half before we go to the airplane, which is about an hour before we take off, because we have to prep everything. And there's no up button or down button. So a lot of people think. We have started bringing a dog. The dog barks if I reach for the wrong switch. And if I hit that switch, the dog actually bites me. So I'm going to hand a few of these things around. These are actual copies of the flight plan that got me to the Polish Club. And the flight plans going to and from Hong Kong. You see what I have to check every time I fly in an airplane. These books. Weather, materials, etc. So when I walk into the operations center, I say it's about this big, there's usually 30, 40 pilots. Gunter will know what the operations center is all about. So everybody salutes him, I'm sure. So we're going to look at some very rudimentary checks when I look at the flight plan. We're going to look at great circle estimation, which by the way is another flight plan. We're going to look at the estimated en route time, the burn, the TMI. Wow, that's a really neat acronym. I like acronyms. That is the track message identifier. Did you ever use those, Gunter? TMIs?
No.
Oh, you were military. You didn't need clearance to do stuff.
Too much information?
Too much information is an absolutely perfect acronym. So when you see these flight plans going through, you'll notice that this is page 1 of 33, and that's a short flight plan to get me to London. So I got to go through all 33 pages. So I've just got some general information, aircraft, which aircraft type it is. Right off the bat, there's this little red chunk here. This is my route, which I'm going to program the computer on board to do. This is basic information about my flight, what level I'm going to start at, how long the flight is estimated with those winds from the main computer, how much fuel I'm going to do, great circle distance I'm going to track, the actual distance I'm actually going to track. So what we're going to do is we're not going to look at the word brakes here, which is an absolutely fantastic program which I wrote because sometimes we fly 15 hours. And we'll look into that. It's the only good picture of the HPCL CX, which has now been modified to a CL, but the CX did all this, just it took a little longer. So we're going to look at the Great Circle navigation. That was that red box you saw on the previous page. We're going to look at Great Circle number 1 from Vancouver to London. The actual distance that this EGLL, which is London, and that Vancouver through all these tracks is that much further than Great Circle. And I'm going to throw this around at you now because what I've done here is a plot, which we do. Now this one's got bare minimum. I only drew the part that I'm going to talk about. But we put the weather on here. We put point of no returns and critical points on these, which change and move due to winds and aircraft. But you can take a look at the yellow line, and then I'll refer to that later. So as we know on a globe, the shortest distance between 2 points is a Great Circle. And on a polar plot like that, it looks like a straight line. But what we track is based on winds. Shortest time between 2 points is not the shortest distance. So the 481CX, which I'm using, I have loaded in a database all the airport call signs that you saw, EGLL, YVR, Vancouver, London is LHR, and I've attached the latitude and longitude in the extended memory to that database because I'm basically lazy. I do not want to put latitudes and longitudes in each time. I want the computer to do that. So this database has all the... So, a neutron, electron, or proton walk into a bar. Bartender looks at the neutron and says, no charge. So a chemist walks into the bar with his blonde chemist friend. The chemist walks up and says, I'd like some H2O to the bartender. The second chemist who's blonde walks up and says, I'd like H2O too, and dies of hydrogen peroxide poisoning. No? They should see me Thursday night's comedy spot.
The neutron walks.
Turn the mic off, Richard.
The neutron walks into a bar.
Have that irrational.
Oh yeah, what was that again? The irrational?
Yeah.
I might be irreverent. I'm not irrelevant.
Yeah, a neutron walks into a bar run by a proton. The bartender says, no charge, and it says, are you sure? And the bartender says, I'm positive.
I'm going to be neutral on that joke. Anyhow, we'll get back to the 41CX. We have codes here called EGLL. That's the ICAO code, or the IATA code. The ICAO code is LHR. And being lazy, I don't want to stick 4 letters in the computer. I'm going to stick 3 letters. My little program I wrote has something called a comp. Funnily enough, on this flight plan, over 8 hours of flying, my tailwind averaged 1 knot. Sometimes it averages 200 knots with a tailwind, sometimes it's a headwind. Now, my program's going to come up and it's going to ask me the comp because I want to estimate, see if this flight plan has gross errors, and that's all this is a gross error check. So I'm not going to get into aviation planning and stuff like that. We're having fun here. So, this is why I like the lights out, but we can't. Here's the program. Here's a little video loop. We'll see if it works on this. I'm going to input the airport codes, where I'm leaving from, where I'm arriving to. I'm going to put in the component, which was 1 knot. The 465 knots is what my airplane does. Always. We plan plus or minus 5 knots. That's built into my program. And it's going to output the following. So let's see if my finger works. Come on. It moved, didn't it? Richard, if this doesn't work, I'm going to get my computer. Okay, we're back online. Hello.
That's what all my students in the
HP's at work in aviation. We've been through this. Those are the culprits. There's the flight deck. Showing up at flight planning. We've gone through that. There's the red section. Okay, now we're on schedule. Great circle navigation. We're going to run my first program here. I can tell you what it was going to do, but let's see what happens now. There we go. Whoa. Airport. YVR. I'm using synthetics here. And I'm dropping my mic. So I'm using a little of our CCD-ROM stuff from the CL. Estimated en route time, 8 hours, 52 minutes. And remember, it's a rudimentary check. We had actually. So what happened here is we came up with the flight plan Great Circle 492. I got 4088. I'm looking into why, but it depends. Airports are 10 miles wide. So I don't know where they're pulling their datum off. I pulled mine off the chart. So I don't know what the onboard computer's pulling off, which is what they call vendor error. In any case, it's no big deal. And you can see that my rudimentary check, 8 hours versus 8 hours, 52 minutes on that flight plan, which is going around, which was on the previous page. So that's a very quick and dirty check at the operations center. And I'm still in the operations center, and I got to wow them. So I pull out my HP01. And I don't know, how many people here are familiar with what HP01s do? Okay, so for those, other than the bank account, I've got 5, but I don't buy them full price. I fix them. This is the watch. So here we are in the HP51 or HP01, and they have something called dynamic times, where it actually does calculations with the time as it's running, and then displays the result of whatever that calculation or rate was, which is updated every second. So on an aircraft, this is wonderful, because what I do is run dynamic time functions, and then here's one that really throws me. Flight attendants and pilots want to know how much time is left. Passengers always ask, are we almost there? How much time is left? They don't say, how much time has gone by, unless they're waiting for their drink. And then they have a complaint. But we're also got a problem on our $700 or $150 million airplane. No countdown clocks. So I don't count down.
That costs extra.
That's extra. Well, I haven't found it. It's a Boeing aircraft. So what we're going to do again is we're going to take our estimated en route time of 8 hours, 45 minutes. We're going to look at our burn of 70,000. And by the way, 70,000 is about 9 hours, is about 8,000 kilograms an hour. So I can do the math in my head. 8 times 8,000, 64,000 pounds I'm going to burn. So that's a quick way, but you got to do it with the watch. So I'm going to put the estimated en route time in the stopwatch, so it counts down. That's what the HP01 will do if you put it in the stopwatch. If you put a number in, it counts down. I'm going to then multiply it by 8,000. That'll be all set, and when I start the airplane and go rolling down the runway, I'm going to hit the stopwatch, and then I'm going to fly the airplane. So what's going to happen here is, while I'm still in flight planning, I'll just show you what, now that's what I was afraid was going to happen on my computer for some reason. So here we go back, and now it'll work. So here comes the pointer. Excuse my shakiness. So I'm putting in the flight plan time, 8 hours and 45 minutes. That goes in the stopwatch. Then I'm going to multiply that by 8,000. So I'm multiplying time by a constant. And I get 70,000. Well, that actually, if you do the math, is absolutely right. Now I'm going to roll down the runway, and I'm going to start the stopwatch. So now I'm counting down. So I'm going to take my pointer, and there's the math as it goes. That is the burn, counting down, and the remaining fuel left on the burn. So I'm at 69,000. By the way, that's how much fuel I'm burning every second. 4 kilograms. Now I'm going to go back to stopwatch. And somewhere down the flight, I'm going to check my burn and compare it to the gauges. Oh, it's still there, and it's still counting down. It's an amazing little thing. I don't know any other watch that can do that.
So your batteries last during the whole flight?
Oh gosh, yeah. I get free batteries at Radar Shack because I bought the guarantee, and they always died within 6 months. So, just going through it again. So you see what happened here is I now have time remaining, and I also have fuel amount. Now I came out on the flight, and I didn't do any of this. It was on a small airplane. And they said 2 hours, 17 minutes. So I threw 2 hours, 17 minutes in the counter. I hit start. And then I thought, wait a second, this airplane does 450 miles an hour. So I multiplied the time by 450 miles an hour, and guess what was counting down? The mileage. So every second I saw how much miles we had left. So let's go on to the next slide. And there's that TMI. I love this one. Track Message Identifier. Now we have to look at that flight plan. You'll actually, if you go through it, there's actually a page on there which tells me what my TMI is. The TMI is an identifier for a track between America and Europe. And those tracks are the blue lines. These blue lines, as a group, shift up and down to take advantage of the winds. But instead of everybody just heading out over the ocean, they feed you in on this part. So you're 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, or 40 miles, 40 miles, 40 miles. The track message indicator is a number of the day of that year. So if you're the 300th day of the year, it'll say it's the 300th day. So when you get your flight plan, it's very important that you check that part of the section in red where it says it's 214. Well, what's a track message identifier? I found out this watch calculates the track message identifier. All it is the number of the day of the year. Now name another watch that will calculate that in a couple of button pushes. So let's see if my little computer will give me a black, yeah, it gave me a black screen. Okay. Oh, you were supposed to see that, Joe. There you go. So here I go. I'm counting down the time. Well, I'm actually not in the airplane. There's the date, day, month, year. There's the TMI. All it did was grab that date, figure out what day of the year that was numerically. Great little thing. So I told you about the blue tracks. I told you that you really don't have to know this, but that everything's funneled so we don't run into each other. And
what happens when you fly across midnight?
Midnight?
Yeah.
Oh, nothing.
So you start with the TMI?
No, the TMI is the flight plan. Everybody taking off after midnight has the next day's TMI. And the TMIs change, I think, at 900 every morning, Z, and just for the heck of it, that's because Alaska, it's 9 hours across the states to Alaska, so by the time it's 9 o'clock in Alaska, or 9 o'clock GMT, Alaska has turned to midnight. So they had to have the standard. And you're making me digress, and I never do that when I converse. So we now have the TMI done, we've done the fuel, we've done the estimated en route time, we've done a whole bunch of stuff. Now we're going to pull out this beautiful little machine, and everything I know about this machine is thanks to Joseph's book. Yes. So we're going to do, on that map, as it goes around, you're going to see a picture. Here's the main body of the flight plan. You can see I'm going from that latitude and longitude to that one and that one and that one. If you look across here, this 66 north 40 west to 65 north 30 west is 256 miles, magnetic heading of 124, a true track of 99 because, of course, North Pole's not North Pole. We have variation. So when I'm flying, to make sure the airplane hasn't messed up, to make sure I haven't messed up, we have a procedure where every 2 degrees past each point, I have to plot on that paper, that map, the correct latitude and longitude. There's a few ways to do that, and here they come. What we're going to do is put in the number of waypoints. If you look at that map, there are 5 waypoints I'm going to use. I'm going to tell that I want 2 degrees offset. It's going to ask me for the waypoints that I have on that flight plan. And then it's going to calculate the 2 degrees. When I say west 38, it's going to calculate the north latitude to the minute. And then I'm going to plot that. And then I'm going to compare that to my onboard computer when I get to that point, and they better be the same or I'm in trouble. So there's the map, for those that haven't seen it yet. There is a point, there is a latitude and a longitude, there's a latitude and longitude. You can see right there, 30 by 65 and 40 by 20. So I'm going to point, I need to plot these orange lines to make sure my airplane is actually pointed in the right direction and that I'm not receiving bad information. Now the information I get on my computer is removing is from 3 onboard GPSs with backups on, navigational aids with backups on, inertial navigation, yes.
What are the scallops looks like, radar?
Oh, don't worry about those, unless you want a full navigational planning. Those scallops are a control area for Iceland. This is Greenland. There are lots of lines on here. These dotted lines are the variation.
Got it, that's all I wanted.
Yeah, and these brown lines are very important, but we're going to ignore them for this conversation. So here we go. Let's see what It does. What I'm going to do is, this is the onboard computer, and my HP 71B better match those coordinates, or actually conversely, that better match my HP 71B, because I believe it. I don't believe this stuff. You always want an independent source of confirmation. You can't use the same data all the time. So here we go. You don't have to really, I just explained everything in the right-hand column. Besides, it's on your thumb drive. Oh, did I miss it? Yes, I did. I went 1, 2 back. So, using the FMC. Yes, yes. There it is. Here we go. So, I have a program called Intermediate Latitude. Watch my finger. There. Can you actually read that on the screen? Lights. This is ridiculous.
Oh.
I'm going to put in the latitude. Now, this program I wrote actually checks which direction am I going by comparing the next latitude or the next longitude to the next longitude. It knows if I'm going west or east and how to correct and put in the data on its own. So I'm putting the data in right now. You just can't see my finger down in the numeric pad. And we got one more to go. 62 degrees, longitude 20 west. And here it goes. For 20 west, it's 61.51.8. Intermediate longitude, 58 degrees. Here comes latitude, 66.51. Now those are the points I'm plotting. And those are the points that better match the onboard computer as I go by them. So that's an independent check to make sure I'm on. And I love the way this thing formats. I wish it printed this way without carrying this big giant printer around with me. So it's pretty interesting how you can get these things going. Now this represents 17 hours of boredom in the engineer's seat for years. But it's aviation, so I'm allowed to play.
Geoff?
Yes?
I understand that this is an independent confirmation of where you're doing.
Yes.
How does the company you work for feel about using these items to...
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
They don't know. And I'll tell you why. I follow their procedures. So I use the computer. This is just something for me to check that the computer is right.
Oh, I see.
Computers can go wrong.
Right.
As Honeywell told me one day, a 1 in a million chance to their computer, which is in every airliner around the world, happens 1,000 times a day. So a 1 in a million error on that computer happens. So there's the flight deck. That's my office. I'm finally in the flight deck. I've left operations.
Which seat are you in, left or right?
Well, I'm in the right seat right now. I'm going to the left seat, the 787, in about 3 months. There's another reason to delay the book. So, yes, I'm on the flight plan, I'm on the flight deck, and now we're going to do cockpit checks. One of the cockpit checks is we're going to check how much fuel we have on board. Interestingly enough, when I show up, the fueler's usually fueled the airplane, and he hands me this slip. And on this slip are a bunch of things. You see 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 1, the airplane arrived at the gate with that much fuel. And if I actually arrived there before he fueled me, I would see 11,200 on the fuel gauges, digital. Then the truck driver came along with the gas tank. Oh, up here, number 2, that's what I need, 78,700 kilograms of fuel. Everything is in weight, not volume. We'll find out why. That's how much fuel I need to go all the way to London, miss London, and end up in Manchester or somewhere else because London got closed for weather, accidents, whatever. So then the truck driver gives me 84,800 liters. Now I got to convert liters to kilograms. Or if I'm in the States, they give me gallons. And this becomes 3.00 plus or minus temperatures. And we have different types of fuel. I don't have to worry about that. That's where it freezes. Because when you fly over the pole, your fuel can go to minus 46. So we got all these numbers. We've got this chart. And Geoff gets out the flight plan. This is now page 3. We're only on page 3. Hong Kong is 47 pages. So I take that little yellow section, and this is my flight plan. It tells me I need 78.3, and it tells me that overhead London I'll have 12,600 kilograms, which equates to 1 hour, 43 minutes of flying. So I can hang around in the air over London while they sort things out for about an hour. And then at 43 minutes, I'm saying goodbye and going to an airport that'll let me land. So here we go. Why do we have to worry about volume versus weight? Right, and the volume changes. There's the high school science teacher. So when you go to NOAA on Monday, for those, he's going to talk about temperature climbing and global temperature, increase in temperatures, and he's going to tell you that just because of the temperature, the surface water by 3 degrees will increase 18 inches. And that's by temperature, that's not by melted ice. So the temperature effect, well, that happens to fuel. I'm sitting in Hong Kong, it's 35 degrees centigrade, the fuel is in a storage outdoor tank, it's 35 degrees centigrade. I'm at 56 or 40,000 feet, it's minus 56 there. The temperature is going to decrease in the wing tanks because we don't heat it. What's going to happen to my volume? It's going to shrink big time. So we go by weight, which means we have to calculate the weight based on the temperature of the fuel they're giving us. So here's what happens. I need 110,000 kilograms for an example. And we're using fuel from the flight plan. So in this case, I won't use the 110. I'll just use this one. We've got 11,200 kilograms to review. We need 78.3. We're sticking 84,800 liters in. Did everybody hear about Gimli, where they ran out of gas and glided? This is one of the reasons. And their gauges weren't working, and it was a brand new airplane. If you want to talk about that, that's beer later. There is the specific gravity constant for fuel at 35 degrees centigrade. So I get out my 42S. See, they all make it. I love this thing. We're going to put in the before total, the after total, tender uplift, SG, default, liters or gallons. Well, we're going to use liters because the only place in the world I've ever run into gallons, and they're little wimpy gallons at that, they're not imperial gallons, is the US. So we're going to focus on liters. And the output is going to tell me if I'm over or under my 78,000 that I need. It's going to tell me if I pass or fail. A fail is 5% out on the calculation. It's going to tell me my difference. If it's under 5%, it won't tell me fail. And it's going to tell me actually how much over or under I am. Now, we don't do this. We did it on every single airplane until I got on the 777, and we don't do it because we have an onboard computer. I'm being a little sarcastic there. Now, my computer gives me a black screen. No, it didn't. It worked this time. So, B777, fuel, I love this. Fuel in tank. There's the arrival fuel. You'll see the finger come right up there. There's the departure fuel. Watch this. This is neat. The finger's going to, there it is. Now I'm going to put the tender in. This is the liters. I bet you it's that button. I'm right. 794 is the SGR. And I'm going to hit difference. And here it goes. Watch it. It's fast. Don't blink. Doesn't matter. I have a printer. This is slick. You should see them staring at me. They don't know what to make of this. Well, it passed. So let's go to the next page.
Does a liter of fuel have as much efficiency if it's cold, really cold outside?
No, that's the problem.
I mean,
Think
besides
about it.
Besides the contraction.
If you have a 1 liter at 30 degrees C, it's 3/4 of a liter. I'm exaggerating, just making it up for demonstration. If you have 1 liter at 30 degrees centigrade, you have 3/4 of a liter at -10 because I'm in Edmonton and it's winter.
Yeah.
You haven't got as much fuel. If you, that 1 liter has less bang to the buck if it's warm. There's less energy in it. It's expanded.
Yeah. If you have the same amount of mass,
it has the same amount of mass, but it's got less weight. And I burn by weight. I need weight on an airplane because I've got to balance my tanks, and you don't balance your tanks by liters, you balance your tanks by weight. You also can't take off at a specific weight. You can't land at a specific weight. So everything in the airplane has to be converted to weight. So no matter how fast the 42S is, here comes my, well, we'll get into volumetrics in a minute because it's not I'm a chemist who orders H2O2 when he gets to the bar. So, isn't this wonderful? Now, I like this because what I do is I keep this with my documentation. If I'm running short of fuel and we don't know why, this may be one of the reasons, but we don't do this. We used to do this on the older airplanes. And I'll tell you why we don't do it, because I actually sat down for an hour with the chief pilot going over the documentation because he was wondering. Now I don't know why that stopped. Keep going. Oh well, it doesn't matter. What it's going to do is it's going to do that's the printout. That took a while to get done too in the programming. So you see I was boarded 11,200. I need 78.3. I should get something like 67,100 kilograms of this number. What I did get was 67,331. Now I have put a rounding in here. I don't need decimal places. So if it's under halfway, I'm rounding down. If it's over halfway, I'm rounding up. That's part of the code. So I'm over 230 kilograms, 400 pounds, fine. On a 78,000 pound load, who cares? That's nothing. Now, if we go to the next page, I have now substituted 8. The reason I substituted 8 in there is this is the default for my onboard computer. I can't change that. So the onboard computer is telling me I'm 740 over and I'm out 1%, when in fact I'm not, when you put the correct SG in. This was my concern. If you're overfilled, that's called the max takeoff weight. That's called the max zero fuel weight. That's called the max ramp weight. I can't take off if I'm overweight. And they actually say you can't take off even if you're that much overweight. But that's not how much I was overweight according to my documentation. According to the computer, that's what was happening. And worst case scenario is right here. The fuel was so warm, I was under 27 or 2,500 kilograms. 2,500 kilograms represents an about, well, I'll figure it out in a second. Anyhow, I'll tell you in a second. This is my onboard computer. This is the SG. The SG on Boeing is called the fuel control weight factor, or the fuel control weight factor. It defaults to 8. I can't change that. So I had a concern. If I'm under, do I board more? If I'm over, do I drain it? So you can see that the accuracy of these, let's see why I'm on my way to London. So you can see my concerns. Now I'm just going to give you a little heads up. The aircraft has been certified by the Federal Aviation Administration when it was licensed and tested to pass or fail on this computer, and that I can ignore all the rest of my documentation that we've been doing. I don't like that description, but that's when you're flying an 800,000 pound airplane, 2,000 pounds is not going to impact it according to the FAA's certification. It did impact before, but for some reason this airplane it doesn't. So let's get beyond that. We're on our way to London. And guess what? We're finally on our way to London. And this is the simulator. That's the graphics. It's incredible. You want a video game? Walk into one of those.
Looks like you got good weather.
Well, you can in the simulator, but it never is when they're testing you. It's always lousy and you never see out. As a matter of fact, I went into Vancouver in the simulator in a test and saw my house on Google Earth. I said, can I go down? So I went down to 200 feet above the ground and the old car was in the driveway. I think it was the old car. It might have been somebody else's car. There's my inner voice again. Okay, so when we're in the air, what can we do just to keep ourselves excited other than not reading a newspaper or not talking to the guy who decides he doesn't like you and doesn't want to talk to you for 15 hours? And that would drive me nuts, would it, you think? So rolling down the runway, I start the HPO1. We get to the top of the climb, and what's the first thing we got to do? We got to figure out how many breaks we're going to take. And because we want to maximize the length of breaks. If I'm going to Hong Kong, I got 4 guys. 2 are in the flight deck, 2 are in the bunk. What are the breaks? One set's going to land, when I take off, and the same set's going to land. The other 2 are for relief. So we have many different scenarios on the break. Then I'm going to calculate the times for the optimum altitude. My computer will not tell me the times for the optimum altitude. ATC may change my routing. We have temperature corrections, which is a big one, and if you saw HP Solve a few years ago, there was a little write-up on my when they interviewed me, when Richard did. And then we have altimeter problems, we have crosswind calculations, and the most important is the pub open? So, break schedules, top of climb. Countdown timer started, I'm rolling down the runway. I got an 8-hour, 45-minute flight plan. I got 3 pilots. We only need 2 in the flight deck. One's going to go to the bunk. He's going to come up. The next one will go to the bunk. He's going to come up. Why? Well, we're taking off at 11 o'clock at night. I've been up since 7 in the morning. They called me up at 7 in the evening and said, can you do the flight? We're going through midnight. They throw on the extra pilot. Break schedules can be created for 3, 4 pilots. They can be created as 4 equals, 3 equals. We can do different variations. So I wrote a program. And this is the program. We're going to look at time here. We're going to select time, and then we're going to get break, then we're going to follow prompts. It's that easy when you have a calculator that you just saw the outcome to that. Let's see if this works now. There we go. It's going to push time. It's going to select break. And here comes the flight number because I like labeling things. Now you should see them when I hand this up. Usually it's pen scratching and scrawl going through turbulence. I print out 1 copy for each guy. So we're going to land in London at what time? 9:25 in the morning. That means I've got, about 9 hours to meet Vladek and have a beer at the Polish Club. Now, defined time is 4.2 hours, which means I think I threw in 4 breaks here today, or 3 breaks? 4 breaks. I threw in equal breaks, that's it. So we don't have to worry about how fast that goes by, but this is how the program labels what's happening. And I'll be able to explain it more on the next page. So there's the first time period break, 1830 to 2120. Second is 2122. Oh, I know, this isn't the London flight. This is a Hong Kong flight with 4 guys, 4 breaks. And we defined the break period to be 4 hours and 2 minutes or 20 minutes long. And we wanted that 4-hour and 20-minute break in the last 2. You do that one when you're exhausted with a pen and a piece of paper. So, next page, here you go. Flight 33 to Hong Kong. 4 breaks, starting at 30 minutes after 6 because you don't want to start when you take off. And you don't want to end when you land. So I have my computer correcting for 20 minutes and 30 minutes from the time inputs I put in automatically. So I don't have to think. That's that paragraph. I selected a 4-hour and 20-minute break, and I told it to put the 4 hours and 20 minutes down here when I said 3.4 of the 2 breaks I wanted to use. If I wanted the long time in front, I would have said 1.2, break 1 and 2. I just do IP and FP to pull those terms out and do the math. So there you go. I've got my break, and it took me about, as long as you saw, that's how long it takes to break. And that maximizes my break time. So I love doing that program. And there are many other variations in that I could have selected. So now we go to optimum altitude. As we're flying, we get lighter. As we get lighter, we want to go higher to take advantage of thinner air. The thinner the air, the further I have to go to get a certain volume of air. The further I have to go to get a certain volume of air, I burn the same amount, the same volume of fuel. So the higher up I go, the longer that one volume amount of fuel will take me. But I can't go up there too early when I'm too heavy, or I'll be wallowing through the air like this. I want to be nice and even all the way. So in English, well, there's a technical term, optimum altitude defined by the altitude at which equivalent airspeed for a thrust setting, blah, 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 blah. All it means is best altitude given my weight and air temperature. And the flight plan calculates it, but things change. So when I take off at 29,000 feet and I end up at 38,000 feet 4 hours or 14 hours later, I want to know when I can be at 30, at what time. Because ATC may call me up and say, when are you able that altitude? Now, what I do, because I've got a ton of time, is that's the data, and that's how I read it. So I regress that data with my HP41 statistics module, or I go into the 42S, and I get this. Here we go. Weight, 360. I just follow the prompts. Fuel flow, 8.2, that's off the gauges. I want to go up to flight level 360, and I'm at 300 right now. I'm at a 777-300, which is the big stretch version. And there's my time, 12:12, and it's asking for the next altitude. So I am able at 12:12 to climb to 360. That's optimal. Well, we took off at about 0400, so that's 8 hours away. But now I can hand that up, and I know when they ask, I have an answer. Guess what? My computer doesn't tell me that. I have to go to the charts. I don't like going to the charts if I don't have to. So I wrote the same program here. Let's see how it works. B777, altitude, optimum altitude, follow the prompts. And if you're not falling asleep with the light out, I'm going to turn the lights on, because I always fell asleep in grade 9 chemistry with the lights out when I was watching a film loop. We're all awake, aren't we?
Yeah.
So,
Leave it, Richie.
300?
Leave it.
That's
Leave it off.
Leave it off?
Brutal, man.
Yeah, okay, leave it off. They want it off. So there you go. I'm able 360 at 1213. The problem with the 42S is there's no built-in clock. So I have to add the time. The 41CX, that's why I keep harping on, do you have a clock on your scientific programmable calculator? I need time. Otherwise it's not fun. So we're trucking along on the way to London. And they call me up and they say, you're going to hit somebody, so we'd like you to go not to 6220, but to 6120. So now I'm going to punch in 6120 in my computer, and away we go. But I don't have my checkpoints here. I have to make my own. So here's for the 29C. And there it goes black on me. So I'm going to start that loop again. And I'm going to do that again. You'll see what happens. So I have in this program, and all the listings are at the end of the thumb drive, in your thumb drive that you were given. You can look at those and laugh because they're not that artistic. So I put in 6120, and I put in 6530, and isn't that slick? That really gets people looking. What the hell is that doing? There you go. That's what it did. It went 362. It gave me 362 nautical miles at 127 degrees from that point to that point. And then I can amend the flight plan. And then when I actually go by this point, I will check my computer and make sure, my onboard computer, that it matches that. So there's my independent check. But without this, there would have been no independent check.
Have you had them different?
Pardon me? Well, when you get a track distance change, a flight plan change in the air, it's easy enough to put it in and have the computer figure out the numbers, but how do I know that those numbers are correct? I pull out the 29C or whatever I have, and I run a great circle route on that. And it pulls out true track and distance.
How often have you seen them different?
No, it's just an exercise, something to do to keep me awake. Thank you, Richard. Actually, 108 times last week. No, okay. So here you go, great circle checks on the flight deck. There's the 29C. I put it in a computer, Vancouver, and it spits out these Latin longs. I throw that into the calculator at the correct point. When I pull out the Toronto ones, I throw that in, and then I hit my computer, and it comes up with 083 magnetic, and it gives me a great circle distance. So I take a look at Vancouver, and I look at Toronto, and I look at these two numbers here, and I compare it to what I've got, and it's kind of blurry up there, but they're right on. This was an interesting one. This is the scary one. We actually lead the world, I don't know why, I guess it's because Canada's cold, in cold weather operations. This is why Air Florida slams into bridges in Washington in a snowstorm. What do they know about snow in Florida? Not a lot. We know about snow. So do the people from Minnesota. Hands up, Minnesota, below. So, we're not going to get into the math here, but there's a beautiful little formula. And isn't a formula absolutely wonderful for a calculator that's programmable? And if you have an alphanumeric calculator, it's even more fun. Now, every program you've seen here is on every single one of my calculators. I have a DAS suite of programs in BASIC, RPL, RPN, just to go for it. So I'm going to Toronto where it's cold, and I usually don't like going. And it's a cloudy base of 200 feet. There's only a half a mile visibility. It's 2,600 feet. The temperature is minus 25. There's some altitudes I'm concerned with. We don't have to go into what the definitions are, but here's a very important one. That is as low as I can go to land the airplane, and as low as I can go and not see the runway. I've got to see the runway by that altitude. Toronto is 565 feet above sea level. 747 feet minus 565 feet means I better see the runway at 182 feet, and I'm coming down at 700 feet a minute, so look out. So, what happens when the temperature is minus 25 to my altimeter? My barometric altimeter, which is what I use, which is based on a standard day of 2992 inches and 15 degrees C. Well, that's the chart. It's just gobbledygook. That little bit there is here. This bit here is this. And this little bit is this, my decision altitude. Do I see the airport runway? No, go away. Yes, land. What is that altitude at minus 25? Oh, come see HP67. Are you having as much fun as me?
I don't think so.
There we go, HP67. 565 feet airport altitude. Minus 25 temperature, watch that finger. 747 feet minimum descent altitude. What's the correction? This is the part I love. I could stare at this all day. It's like a fireplace to me. So it gave me a number. Then I threw in 2120. Don't worry about how fast it is because we're going to look at those numbers. And it's going through that whole formula. And it spits out 2400 instead of 2120. That's out 300 feet about. That's not nice. Now we'll look at the red dot numbers. 4,000 feet at minus 25. When my altimeter reads 4,000 feet, I'm actually 600 feet too low. I'm actually at 3,400 feet. So when my altitude reads 4,000, better at that 600. I call it 4,600. So this is more realistic. The red line is what my altimeter is telling me. It's lying to me. The black line is where I should be. So 3,000 feet, my altimeter says I'm here. I've got to add 400 feet. Does that make sense to you? I've got to be 400 feet higher than what my altimeter says. Get down here. 780 is 40 feet. Remember, it's only 185 feet, and I'm coming down at 700 feet a minute. I now have to see the runway on my altimeter at 780, not 747. That's pretty important. Now, we do that in North America. We do that a lot of airlines. There's a symposium next week right now in Ottawa with all the American airline chief pilots and stuff, and it's a cold weather symposium for this reason. Now, that's my $150 million airplane. Barometric altimeter, which is based on differential air pressure on 2 points on the outside of the aircraft, gives me that. So it's corrected. Everybody here know what atmospheric pressure is? Well, you know, your barometric pressure, it's raising, it's falling, etc. We can do it in hectopascals. The standard day is 2992. So when your altimeter setting is over 31, it imparts another error. And there's the FAA right about if you're over 31, and that's what they want you to do, and I made it small because you don't want to read that. Here's what it really means. From my manual, if my altimeter setting is greater than 31 inches of mercury, that's that little barometric thing you see on those, if you've got one at home, I have to increase that do I land or not land altitude by 100 feet for every 1/10 of an inch over 31 inches. Now, if you think that's confusing, it's why I wrote a program. It is confusing because that happens to me 3 times a year, maybe. And I have to remember everything. So I wrote this. By the way, I just did a conversion on temperature in one of the conversion. Oh, there it is, right there.
Does the commercial system take this into account?
No, if you correct everything, you must report it to air traffic control because they're expecting you here and you're going to be here, which is really here, depending on what you're doing down here. So you tell them what you're doing. They don't correct. They only correct radar vector altitudes because when they are vectoring you around, they are responsible for your terrain separation. But when you are on an airway, you are responsible and must make the corrections.
Don't you have a radar altimeter as well?
And it's good to 2,000 feet. It's called a radio altimeter. And it's wonderful making approaches. It is as accurate to 6 inches, and it's wonderful unless you're above 2,000 feet. And you're not supposed to rely on it unless you're doing a radio altimeter approach. And the airport has the equipment to support that approach, and your aircraft has that equipment, and 90% of the time, no. One or the other is missing. So, you have to physically stop the black screen and start it again. See, if his worked, it would have worked perfectly. So, clear, get rid of that temperature, go to 777, grab my temperature manual, grab the 31-inch one, and I'm going to put in 31.25 for this example. Remember, every 1/10 of an inch. I have to, ceiling's 350 feet, I have to have 1.5 miles visibility when I hit 350 feet, and here, because that goes by so quickly, is what really I'm doing. If I don't see the airport by 650 feet, I'm going. Not 350 feet anymore. It's a safety barrier. It's a safety measure. I'm much more conservative. And not only that, where I could look 1.5 miles and have the required visibility, now I need 2.25 miles. So you have to compensate for what the aircraft is not doing for you. Everybody remember this machine here? Left or right crosswind, tailwinds. These are all little things you can do. We have different types of approaches, as I just mentioned, based on aircraft and airport, etc. And if you have an autopilot on, well, it's wonderful, but an autopilot can't have more than a 15-knot crosswind. And you can't land the airplane with more than a 10-knot tailwind. That's illegal. You'll go off the end of the runway. Or the autopilot can't maintain the track. Now, I can fly the airplane to 38-knot crosswind, but the autopilot can't. So, very simple program. Everybody's seen it. It's the old cosine triangle program. I'm just trying to get rid of that black screen. Let's see if that worked. There you go, my crosswind program. 20 knots at 220 degrees, landing on runway 29. Go for it. Oh, I love that. 7-knot headwind, because of the way I wrote the program. -19 is a left crosswind. So guess what? I can't do an automated approach on that runway. So I better have the right visibility to do a manual approach, or I'm not landing. What's next? Ah, right, the fun part. What time is it in London? Now, this is why I like having a clock, because the whole point here is I want to get to the Polish club and have a beer with Wladek, and then go to the Imperial College and see the other club. So, ICAO codes, I told you, I'm using 3 letters. Here comes the prompts. It's much better to just show you what's going to happen than to explain it. And let's see if that does it. There we go. It's called, there's the GMT time. I'm making sure it's correct. That's the time in the calculator. What airport? Well, I'm going to London, LHR. London is now 6:49. That's important. Gives me the date, so I don't have to worry about a date line, and it tells me which day it is. And I'll tell you, sometimes you just don't know which side of the date line you're going on. So now I'm in London, and these are other things I can do. And was that 45 minutes? I don't think so. So my 41 is a PDA. We have door codes to get outside and inside. I've encrypted it. I've got a little correction program that was buried. I can do wind chills. I can do any kind of operation in my manual that has charts that I can regress and turn into a formula and stick on to a calculator. This little calculation here is 45 minutes in the bathroom with the door closed, with the flight attendants not bothering you, the passengers not bothering you, because your auto brake system, your anti-skid system, which you have in your cars now, if it doesn't work, I have to calculate all the legs, whether I can stop at those particular airports. My HP41C printed the answer out in 2 minutes. I get on the dispatch, I say, here are my answers, and he says to me, what? I haven't even got the paperwork out, because he's supposed to do it and compare the answers. So I love the 41C. Now when you take all these things with you, you don't have to really look at these. I don't have these to hand around, but somebody said when you pick up an RPL calculator, 6 weeks later, you got to go through it line by line. What are the programs? So I do these things. Here's an overlay for the 15C. Latin long, great circle, intermediate latitude, specific gravity, crosswinds, Fahrenheit, centigrade, temperature corrections, inch 15C, 240 lines. There's 67. This is the 67 routine on the iPad. It's actually by this guy, Kuvisoft RPM. I'm not affiliated, but hey, if you're interested in an absolutely incredible 67 emulator on your iPad or iPhone, it will actually email you the listing on the program. It actually slides the card in and out. You can make your own cards, you can do whatever you want, and then you don't have to type it out. It's great. So there you go. I won't go through them all. You can see that every single program, and thanks to Joe, not those. Oh yeah, there you go. Richard, you asked. There's my database in the CL, up in extended memory. There's the routine that calls the database. So all it does is it comes in here and it asks for the airport. It goes into the database and it looks for YYZ. And then I say pull out the numeric. And I've got my Latin law. Then I go to my next database. I'm going to London. Pulls out the numeric. Shoves it through the program. I don't have to think anymore. I just have to make sure I was right. Here's my clock. Tel Aviv. I type in Tel Aviv, I get a 2-hour differential off the calculator's onboard clock, which is always set to GMT. 71B, thank you, Joe. Really, I love this machine. Everything I know is from Joe's book. Now, what I couldn't do is, Joe, how do you print a database on the HP 71B?
You have to read each one.
Exactly, and I wasn't about to do that for this talk. So, rate circle distance checks, brake schedule, see, all the programs have been written, brake schedule continued, and I really, uh-oh, you want me to go now? That's it, that's it, that's it. More data, more program codes. Yeah, my problem is I'm so organized because I'm such a scatterbrain. I bet you didn't know that. Done. I hope you learned a little something. It's not, I was kidding about the dog, but actually, I did get my dog in Toronto, and I put the dog in the flight deck because we live in Vancouver. We picked it up there. We picked her up in Toronto, and I had to go through security with the dog. So I had the dog in the carrier. I'm in uniform, and I walk up and I take my belt off and my shoes. I put everything in here, and I'm calling the dog. And they said, "Put the dog through the X-ray." And I looked at it, I said, "Are you kidding me?" They said, "Well, what are you going to do?" And I said, "I'll tell you what." I pulled the dog up, put the dog on my shoulder, put the carry case through the X-ray machine. I go through. The dog didn't beep. I didn't beep. Get to the other end. He says, "What's the dog for?" I said, "It's an experiment."
The answer is he's a seeing eye dog. So.
No, well, actually, if you want to look at my PDA, it's one of those dogs with hair down here. It's a seeing eyeless dog. Anyhow, so he says,
"There's only one
what's
dog."
it for? And I said, "It's an experiment." What experiment? Well, if I reach for the wrong switch, he's going to bark. If I touch it, it's going to bite. They have no sense of humor.
There's only one dog already on board. They needed a co-dog.
Unfortunately, the last slide with the Tyskie beer I took out because it's just, where am I here?
Halfway.
I'm halfway. Anyway, who's next? You don't need to see the beer. The reason bought it because it was really, really fuzzy. And then I bought some at the local liquor store, and I took some really nice pictures, and my wife wondered why I was taking pictures of Tyskie beer. And anyhow, so it's done. Now, how do I turn all this off? I can do that.
Where is this?
Any questions?
Where's this thumb drive that you mentioned?
Oh, on your HHC little thumb drives that you got in your envelopes? My entire point, but it's not the videos, it's just the Adobe if you want the video.
You mean on the DVD?
I can give you the PowerPoint if you want it. But you know, it's in your thing, if you plug that into your computer.
Is it on one of these discs?
No, it's in the thumb drive.
There's phone.
Oh, that's another thing. It's not big, but it's heavy. Which is why I don't want to take an HPCalc printer with me. That thing.
Oh, this is okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
What kind of comments do you get from the other flight crew when you go through 7 calculators in one flight?
Actually, I've done that. And some of them get it.
I mean,
They think it's fantastic.
we all want to sleep with you when you do that, right? But what do they do?
No, some of them actually, when I hand up that brake schedule, no, I got the brake schedule, I'll get it. Oh, no, you gotta, no, really, I got it. There's your schedule. What the heck? That's unbelievable. What is that? 1989 technology? Why? What do you have? Well, you can get that app on the iPad. No, you can't. You can't print it. Number 2, you can't vary it like I can.
You can do it on the 50G.
You can do it on a, what's a 50G? What's an Airbus? I fly Boeing.
Less weight. So you're calculating your takeoff weight and landing weight very carefully.
Yes.
But you do not take into account the weight of your equipment.
My flight bag.
So
yeah. So what I do is I just take the largest flight attendant, male or female, doesn't matter. I just make them walk back and forth while I move my bag around. Oh, you want this?
Yes.
Okay, no other questions?
Next year we'll see your development programs on the Prime.
Yes, actually, I'm getting one.
on the NTSB report.
On the NTSB report, as Eric says, you'll see all this report. This bag, we couldn't believe it. Look at the stuff in the bag.
Okay, don't go to sleep just yet. We're almost done. I have a lot of